Good morning and welcome to the replay of our live Q&A this morning. Thank you for being here, and we're going to talk about some of the most common questions that people have for memory improvement, for memory techniques, for using a memory palace, and really getting these techniques under control so that you're able to use them in ways that make a difference in your life. So if you're hopping on the live, let me know where in the world you are and what you're doing, what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and hit that thumbs up. Let me know you're engaged, and please do say hello. Things are much more interesting when people are engaged, and bring your questions, because the best questions are the ones that you are wanting answered, and also basically based on your practice. So do say hello. Vivek is here. Hello, Vivek. Thanks for saying hello. Great to meet with you this morning. This is around about the time of the American Thanksgiving, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I'm Canadian myself, so our Thanksgiving was some time ago. But gratitude is something that is worth having every single day. Ah, Jack's here. Long time no see. Well, long time no see as well. Nathan's here. Thanks for saying hello, Nathan. Guys, when you're on the call, people, say hello, hit the thumbs up, let me know you're engaged. And if you're watching the replay, do the same. Thumbs up, leave a comment down below with your questions. What is perhaps the most common question in the world about memory techniques is really, don't these things take a lot of time? And a lot of the questions come down to this notion of time and time investment. Nathan says, I've been practicing your techniques. Well, thank you, Nathan. And thank yourself, because taking the time to practice them is a tremendously rewarding thing to do. And the reality is that actually taking the time to practice them reduces the time that it takes to use them. And it speeds things up. Because no matter where you are with your imagination, the investment in that time is going to increase your imagination in multiple ways that go beyond memory. They go into understanding creativity better, understanding the quality of your mind better, and really opening up a lot of the neural networks and pathways in your brain and allowing those things to function at a higher level. And so that's going to save you time overall with creativity, with just general thought processes, being able to think in a higher way. And yes, that all just comes from practicing memory techniques. And memory techniques are a kind of critical thinking as well, and you'll create shortcuts in thinking as a result. And when you think about it, how can you afford not to use these techniques and just figure out a way to find the time for them? Jack says, it's the perfect question. Initially, it does take a lot of time to set it all up. That is what takes time. The rest comes naturally after that. Yeah, I was on the Productivity podcast yesterday. The interview won't come out for a couple of months, but basically one of the things that I said there is that a lot of people have the impression that it takes a lot of time because you're building two airports essentially and the airplane, and then you're going to have airport 1 and airport 2, and then you'll be able to get in the plane and then just get to that other airport. However, I think that it doesn't nearly take as much time as people think. Time is always the question of how are you using the time, and how are you structuring your practice, how are you structuring your study, and what are you doing in the actual time that you allot to the memory techniques. So one of the best things that you can do is get some sort of training material and go through it from beginning to end, and really, really devote the time to studying it intensely and seriously. And that already will save you a whole bunch of time, because you have had unbroken attention to the training material. These days, a lot of people, they'll turn on a training program and also have 56 other tabs open. They'll have a device that will interrupt them. They'll have 35 other books that they want to read. They'll do things in noisy places, and they just will not attend to things in a unbroken, concentrated manner. When I was a kid, we used to have USSR, which was unbroken, sustained silent reading. And this is so, it feels so lost in the age of digital amnesia, and I think we all struggle with it, but it's the key. It's really the key. So the first thing is you get a book on memory training like this one. We're going to be talking about this on the Magnetic Memory Method Seal of Approval this month, which I'm really looking forward to. But get any book. It could be the Memory Connection, it could be anything, or a video program or whatever, and go through it from beginning to end and really focus on that training material in an unbroken, uninterrupted, silent, and sustained way. USSR, if it's a book, which would be uninterrupted, silent, sustained reading. Could be USSV, uninterrupted, silent, sustained viewing, something like that. And really, really devote yourself to that. Now, I recommend you take some notes. You can take notes in a book. You can take notes on index cards if it's that kind of material where you're going to be writing about it later and you want to memorize it relative to different stations in a memory palace, or if you want to, whatever, if you're writing a book, then having index cards helps you make a fluid outline because you can juggle those cards around. But having that unbroken study time, that saves you time because you're actually focused on it and you're not being interrupted. You're not losing time, because we lose so much time every time that our focus is broken. So if you want to make learning memory techniques really super easy, sit down and learn them, and then have that same unbroken, sustained practice time. So we had a question here that came up. By the way, use this time to ask your questions. Nathan asked, how much time constitutes a good session? I will tell you, there's no perfect answer for that, but between 5 to 15 minutes is just great. It just depends on what it is that you're practicing with. Memory techniques have the wonderful advantage in the mental arts, the mental literacy that you can develop, where you get better at a topic and better at memory techniques at the same time by using memory techniques to help you learn the topic. They are non-invasive. They do not interrupt the learning process. They supplement it, they accentuate it, they make it more interesting, they make it easier to sustain, provided that you protect it. But the answer, there's no clean answer, but if you were doing memory practice as such, for example with playing cards, then 5 minutes is really all you need. Doesn't matter how many cards that you memorize in that 5 minutes. You could do less than that. I mean, if you're working to reduce your time, then you want to work on reducing your time. So you could just do 2 minutes or less than 2 minutes or whatever it is, wherever you are in your personal record. If it's foreign language vocabulary, then again, it's like 5 minutes can make a huge difference over the course of a week when it's one word in 5 minutes. Or 15 minutes if you're going to do 4 words or 10 words or whatever your personal record is. If you're going to speed memorize vocabulary, well then you're going to practice the speed of memorizing vocabulary, but you can also practice volume. You can practice vocabulary within sentences, so 1 word, 1 sentence. But ideally you want to take breaks. I'm learning to juggle. Now juggling and memory are not the same thing, but one of the things that I noticed very, very quickly is that if you only do it for 5 minutes, then you get much greater gains, or I got much greater gains over a week than trying to sit there for half an hour, you know, because there's something called the challenge frustration curve. I've never actually read that anywhere, but that's just, it's been discussed elsewhere, and I just started to refer to it as the challenge frustration curve. Maybe I'm having what's called cryptomnesia, and I have read that before, and I just don't remember where it is before, but anyway, challenge frustration curve. Basically what it is we know we need to be challenged to learn, and we need to avoid being frustrated to the point that we give up. So you need to keep challenging yourself and notice when you're getting frustrated and scale back to challenge, and then keep pushing challenge so that you just get to frustration and then scale back. If you can do that inside of 5 to 10, 15 minutes of practice, you're going to get so far so fast, and then you want to balance that out per topic. So there are some topics where you want to spend an hour, right? But what is it that you do in that hour? Do you do the memorization in the hour of reading the book? Or do you gather, select, extract the information in particular ways from that book and then do the memorization later? That's my preference, because you prime the mind to remember it a lot better if you're familiar with it as a whole, and then if you've gathered your information together intelligently and in a way that actually favors mental organization and favors speed of memorization based on the tools that you're using to memorize that information, well, then you're going to just do a whole lot better. You're going to do so much better because you've isolated the activities, primed the mind to understand, at least in some sense, a holistic amount of information with a sense of it as a whole, or as being a kind of ecosystem. And those individual pieces of information are parts of the ecosystem, and then you memorize. You do the memorization work separately. And so that's why you can go read a chapter of a book and then go back and in 10 to 15 minutes just sit there and memorize just that information and go and read the next chapter. David says, what happens in a few days? Please say more what you mean, David. Thank you for that question, and I'd love to answer it. If you're hopping on live, please let me know where you are in the world and if you have any questions, and hit that thumbs up button to let me know you're engaged. And Nathan has another question here. Thanks for the response. Have you done any research on the memory techniques of the Saxon and Nordic bards who memorized epic poems and Eddas? You know, I haven't, but that's very, very interesting. Just spitballing a little bit, I know that there are some techniques in the way that a lot of that kind of literature was written that already favors memorization. So I don't know in particular those poems, but in the Greek tradition, for example, we have a lot of devices that are in the poetic composition themselves that favor the ability to recall that. So rosy-fingered dawn, for example, is one device that was used in Greek poetry, and there's a lot. Like rhyme is a memory aid. Iambic pentameter is in many ways a memory aid. LJK is here. Greetings from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Well, thanks for saying hello. Glad that you're here. David says, sorry, I meant what was already happening in a few days from now. I'm calling from England and just discovered you. Well, thank you, David. Appreciate you saying hello. And I'm still sort of not getting the question, but I'm really grateful to make your acquaintance. And I'm not sure what you're referring to in what's happening in a couple days from now, but maybe you mean the seal of approval. Yeah, so magnetic memory method, if you have the memory connection, you get invited to what's called the magnetic memory method seal of approval. We just started this last month, and we go over some books, memory improvement books that are out there in the world that I think are must-read books. And what I do is I kind of come from a tradition of professorial background where I was deeply influenced by one professor in particular who said that the job of the professor is not to have you read the books in advance and then come and tell you what you already read, but rather interest you in reading those books when you haven't read them and isolating the most important points so that you have some idea of why you might want to read that book in the first place. So in other words, the professor should be a salesman in some sense and convince you that this is material that is definitely for you, 100% for you, and that's what we do. So to be involved in the seal of approval, then you can go to magneticmemorymethod.com/connect, and it'll give you information about getting this book, The Memory Connection, and being part of this project. And it's really, really exciting. And so every month we'll go through a book, and yeah, I'm going to basically isolate the three biggest points and really go deep into them and create connections. The whole thing about the memory connection is an ongoing set of connections to memory as a part of your life, as making it as deeply ingrained into your life as possible, so that this tradition of mnemonics continues and persists and does not die in the age of digital amnesia. Mental literacy does not die in the age of Twitter, twitchy culture. There's so much twitch in the world right now, and I find that we need to preserve this tradition more than ever before, because there is massive benefit to the online world. There's no doubt about that. But there's a great risk as well, and we see it all the time. So we want to develop as much connection as we can to these roots of a set of techniques really that have been used for thousands of years, that preserved so much of intellectual wealth during some very dark times before. And I don't know that we're necessarily entering dark times now, but we potentially could be, and so this is the moment. And there's a reason why the mnemonics renaissance is happening now, and it has a lot to do with a reaction to what I would call digital amnesia. And that digital amnesia is very, very real, and a lot of people are suffering. So the ancient Greek concept of the pharmakon really comes to mind at this moment, which is basically the origin of our word for pharmacy. And it essentially was just shorthand for the cure is a poison that is a poison that cures, or the poisonous thing cures and the cure is a poison. And it's a paradox. It's a kind of tautological structure, and that's what the internet is. It's like this giant pharmacy that's filled with all kinds of healing things that will also poison you. You can also think of it like fertilizer. The same thing, when placed on the soil, can nurture the roots, but if you place that same substance on the leaves, it will burn the plant to death, right? Or cause damage. And so that's what the internet is. It's like this giant pharmacy filled with all kinds of things that could heal, but also taken in the wrong way, taken too much, are damaging, deeply damaging. And we're really at a moment where we need to see the organic brain, the chemical brain, as something that needs training more than ever before, because of the detraining and the de-skilling of the online world. So I'm really doing as much as I can to promote mental literacy, to promote memory techniques, to get us all on board. So we got to catch up with some people. Alien's here. Alien, thanks for saying hello. I love that name. I love your little graphic there. Really nice. Edicio from Brazil. Hello, Edicio. Thanks for being here. Jacko's here. Hello, Jacko. Oh, Jacko, we've met in the real world. Speaking of the real and connection, really great to see you again, even in this limited capacity. Common Sense is here. Yes, I remember you, Common Sense. I remember Common Sense too. And common sense, as they say, is not so common. So I'm glad Common Sense has showed up. Nathan says, well said, Anthony. Thank you. The hater is here. All right. Hello, the hater. I'm not sure what you hate, but if it's forgetfulness, we'll let that slide. Gilles Deleuze always said that the only thing worth hatred is stupidity, and forgetfulness is a kind of stupid thing to suffer. So if we can get rid of it, then that's well worth a bit of hatred, I suppose. Jose is here. Hello from Chile. Oh, well, hello. Chile. I've never been, but I hope to be there at some point soon. If you're hopping on this live now, let me know. Say hello. And if you have any questions, please do pop them in so we can go through them. Hit that thumbs up. So yeah, back to the question I started with. Time and managing time is one of the biggest questions people have. Ben Johnson from Spain. Hi, Ben. Ben Johnson, he's a great playwright. I don't know if you've read him, but if you haven't, do indeed. Manage Your Time so that you can read plays by Ben Johnson, at least one. I think that one of the most important things about time management is really just understanding that it's self-management more than anything else. Managing yourself is managing time, and managing time is the act of self-management. And it's not really rocket science, Everybody has the same 24 hours, and there are probably things that you need to do that are more important than other things. And if you just draw out a hierarchy of what those things are and put the most important ones at the top and then do them first before you turn on any digital devices, then you're going to get those most important things done. Your day is going to free up so much. because you will have a sense of accomplishment from the get-go before the tsunami of the internet shows up. So don't have devices near your bed that are connected to the internet, so that if they wake you up, you know, are then looking at a field of notifications. You're looking at a bunch of text. You're going online to check this or that. That's just a recipe for disaster. Best thing to do is have those things far from your bed, and whatever it is that's important to you, like maybe health things, drinking lots of water, maybe some stretching, some meditation, some breathing exercise. I like to do dream recall. Right now, people who belong to the Memory Connection, we're doing Dream Recall Intensive. I think it's one of the most amazing memory things you can do for yourself, to wake up first thing in the morning and just ask yourself, what did I dream? And write it down. Write down everything that you remember, even if you remember nothing. Write down, I don't remember anything. This is such a powerful, it's basically passive memory exercise. And passive memory exercise, we know from the memory science and literature, is going to give you brain exercise that has value for you across the board, for your mental cognition, your mental health, your brain health. It's literally the physical brain being exercised, and you're tapping into memory. Now, there's a lot of passive memory exercises you can do. Unfortunately, a lot of them are kind of boring, but this is an incredible and exciting memory exercise that will unlock so much for you. It is a wonderful, wonderful thing that allows you to just have passive memory exercise and learn more about yourself and recapture things that are lost during sleep. I'm really passionate about dream recall, and I think that it's a hard sell for a lot of people to think, yeah, why should I bother memorizing my dreams? But in our group, there are people who've never remembered dreams in their lives who are now remembering lots of dreams, and there's just a kind of edification that goes with it. And then throughout the day, you can actually remember more of the dreams that you had with just a little bit of general massaging and so forth, and it'll affect your overall recall, or at least there's good reason to notice that that's happening. And then if you compound it with actually having a learning project and a memory project, then you're going to have even greater benefits. So, talking about time management and priority, one of the things that I make sure to do before any machine goes on is to practice memory techniques. And so, you know, today it was Chinese words for food that are in the fridge, but before I get to the fridge, we're recalling them, practicing recalling them in sentences and speaking. And you know, food is one of my hard ones because I'm just not a foodie, but nonetheless, it's time to be talking more about food in Chinese, because we're going to be visiting the relatives again and be able to talk. You know, I already can talk about food, but like specific ingredients and so forth. We're talking about the granular details between different kinds of bok choy. So how am I going to remember this bok choy from that bok choy? Well, easy. The fridge is a great memory palace. Boom, boom, boom. Then this morning, before anything happens, go through, yeah, what was that? Have a little chit chat over the different kinds of bok choy. Use these words, and then insist that I don't really want any bok choy. I'd rather have chocolate pancakes, please. Memory-friendly chocolate pancakes made with rice flour, no sugar, and you know, raw cacao that isn't heated up too much, so it doesn't burn out all the brain-friendly and memory-friendly chemicals. You know, that kind of stuff. So that's really, really great, and it's a great use of time. And we're not doing much time, but the 5 to 10 minutes of chit chat that involves recalling what was encoded the day before in memory palaces, this has massive value when you're doing it on a daily or near daily basis, and you're getting it done first, because then you have this feeling of, I have worked on the goal that I want to accomplish before anything else in life takes over, before even the first chemical of food can cause its waves of reactions that include behavioral things that will happen to you. Your mood might slump, the weather might come, this, that, and the other thing. So if you want to organize your time and manage your time, just figure out what the priorities are for you, put them before any device goes on, and work on them, and do it consistently over time, and just keep doing it. Your confidence will grow, your consistency will grow, your creativity will grow. It's extraordinary what will begin to happen for you. I'm going to check in with the comments here. If you're joining us live, hit that thumbs up button. Let me know where you are in the world, how you're doing, what you're thinking, and any questions that you have, any comments. That would be great. Ben Johnson says, I studied English literature at York in the UK. I went to York, but in Toronto. An apt degree and enjoyed Volpone immensely. I'm hoping to revisit him soon. Okay, well, so you've read your namesake, and that's fantastic. Yeah, literature is great, you know. It's just so amazing. I'm thinking I'm going to go through Shakespeare again. I'm reading some Bloom now, the Anatomy of Influence. What a great book. He's going deep into Shakespeare, and just literature is amazing. Grim Rank is here. Hi, Anthony. Willie from North America. Nice to meet you. Great name, Grim Rank. I like that. That sounds like a band waiting to happen. I can't quite see your icon there, but it's very nice and yellow, and it looks awesome. Seeing some discussion between you all. Common Sense says, I find myself staring at pages for hours and still remembering very little. Yeah, so that's a common thing. I've been there. I had that when I was in university at York in Toronto, and really badly. And how I broke it was, the first thing, I broke it by reading out loud. I found that reading out loud really helps hone concentration. It's not bulletproof, but it really helps. And then using index cards to write down key points. Also, I learned over time to not just read willy-nilly, to read with strategy, so that there's never any reason to stare blank at a book. So you grab a book, whatever it might be, and strategically read it as an object first. So that means, you know, looking at the chapter table of contents, looking at any back matter about the author and so forth. If, for example, there's oh, that's a loud truck. There's a glossary, maybe scanning through the glossary of select terms. If there's an index, scanning through that, starting to prime the mind for a holistic sense of what's going on here. Often I'll read the conclusion first to see, hey, does this author actually conclude anything that's worth seeing, how that the author got to that conclusion? Looking through, are there diagrams, are there pictures? What's the, you know, here's a picture of Ebbinghaus in the memory connection. What's that all about? Starting to just prime the mind. What's this crazy drawing all about? And giving the brain a sense of this thing as an object, as a holistic object that has material reality, and from that material we're going to extract concrete ideas, a concrete web, a story, a picture. And so this is often taught in speed reading, and it's very, very valuable. But the difference is we don't want to then skim the book, but we want to have a sense of it. So seeing it as an object, going through it, looking at what I call it's intellectual architecture. So index, table of contents, any kind of diagrams, just getting a sense of what's in there, and really, really, really having a good sense of it. You know, like this diagram here, like what's that all about? Getting really curious about it. Actually implanting in your brain something to look forward to. You're like, oh, that looks interesting. And ooh, what's this all about? It has arrows, you know? But not diving into it, but just getting a sense of it, getting interested. And then read the introduction. And the introduction, depending on the book, oh, we've got a spammer here. Giving away 3, whatever. Thanks for spamming my live here. Let's see. Can we, whatever. Yeah, so you're gonna have all kinds of ideas that come from the introduction that will prime what you might want to read in that book. So you might want to say, okay, chapter 3, I'm just going to read that first, and then go and read chapter 3. Now, chapter 3 might make references to chapter 5 or whatever. You don't have to read a book in order necessarily, although it is very good policy to read the entire book. And I think that the book from beginning to end is ultimately the best policy. There's a reason that the author wrote it that way. There's a reason why that it went through its editorial processes in that way. but you don't have to necessarily approach it that way. It's just you've got to ask questions on a case-by-case basis and have a general operating strategy, right? A general operating procedure. So another operating procedure you can have, and this is one of the most empowering ones that I ever had, was put limits on how much information you're going to extract. Because I used to go in, well, first I used to write my notes linearly in notebooks, and that's super frustrating. I still do it from time to time depending on the project, and I'll show you something in a second that's really powerful if you're still going to do that. But it's really frustrating to have notes locked in a linear thing, because now you want to go through your notes, but your notes are locked in a linear structure, and so you're fishing through and you have to essentially reread in a linear fashion when you actually want an alinear access to your notes. So I unlocked, and this is because of memorizing cards that I got the idea. Wait a second, I mean, putting information on index cards was there, but I came up with a way of linking index cards, individual index cards, with magnetic stations in memory palaces. So these became very, very powerful tools, much more powerful than having linear notes on pages that have to be fanned through. And the reason is because you can take index cards. Actually, as a matter of fact, I'm doing that right here. So this book is going to be on the next Seal of Approval meeting webinar, and I have all my notes on individual cards here. And what can be done if I wanted to memorize these is can actually link them on a station-by-station basis. But in preparing for the thing, I can also, unlike fishing through bunches of pages in a notebook and being like, oh, this is a mess, I have very, very isolated individual ideas right here. That's just one idea. And I can say, you know what, that idea, yeah, that's going to be third. And, oh, this idea, that belongs in like position 7. And hand them off to my assistant, help put together the slides and so forth. Or if I'm writing a blog post or I'm writing a script for a podcast or whatever it is, can get out the board and say, these are the things I'm going to talk about. If I want to memorize them, right, I can say, yeah, okay, memorize this. This is now station 15 in the memory palace, and so forth. This is really, really powerful. It's unlocking the linear structure and putting it in a flexible, movable structure. The other thing is, too, is that if you ever just only keep your notes in a computer, right? Well, that's really going to be hard to do. You know, you could have it scattered out. I guess there's probably software where you could print on little cards and cut it out on scissors and so forth, but you're not getting the benefit of handwriting involved, and I can just think of endless benefits of why this is so powerful to do, especially from a memory perspective as well, because you can really, really link all of this and strategize it to your memory palace in advance before you sit down and do the encoding. And you can say, this doesn't even need to be memorized at all. Or, you know what, if I'm using the pillar technique in my memory palaces, actually all 3 of these cards here, or let's say I have 3 in my hand here, all 3 of these cards, they can be on a single station because they're related information. So it's really, really powerful. Now, how do you get this amount? Well, you count how many chapters the book has, and then you say, I am limiting myself to 3 pieces of information per chapter. That's it. Now, you might find something and say, you know what, I'm going to cheat, I'm going to make an exception here, and you add 4 or you add 5. 5 per chapter might be good as well. But by creating some sort of limit, some kind of focus, some sort of structure, you then prime your mind to read in a particular way. What's the big idea here? What's the pivotal stuff? What is going to shake the ground, move the earth, and so forth? Instead of this scarcity mindset of, I need to memorize everything, I need to have everything on the page. No, you don't need to have everything. Rarely does anybody need to have everything in a book. That's only going to make your task Herculean. It's going to make your task probably, it's not that it's impossible. You can memorize verbatim. You can memorize anything you want verbatim. But why? In so many cases. There's very few cases in which that's useful to do or a good use of time. when we know that your mind will fill in the blanks if you memorize the most pertinent information and you actually get it into long-term memory. You're going to create knowledge that way. And you're not going to create much knowledge if you just memorize verbatim long amounts of information that you're never going to be called upon to recite. And this is so true. So many people come to me, they say, oh, I want to memorize the whole thing. I've got an exam and the professor insists that I have to blah, 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 blah. Well, your exam is going to be like 2 hours max. And in that time, you would never have all the time in the world to actually rewrite a book in there. You're better off knowing the big earth-shaking ideas. You can go to the professor. You often find previous exams. And if you can't, then you can hunt down previous students if you need that extra advantage. What's most likely to be asked here? But already by doing what I'm suggesting, you're going to prime your brain to pick up so much. Your radar is going to be so intense. If you have the USSR principle, which again is uninterrupted, silent, sustained reading, then you're going to make these connections, and you're going to make the connections so much more solid by having laser-like focus on the big ideas. And you ultimately are the decider of what those big ideas are relative to your understanding of the topic, which is why you go and look at the index and you start to figure out and build pictures in your mind to give yourself a map of what's going on at a much larger level. It's like so simple, and there's a lot of problems in this digital amnesia world where that's not really that possible to do with Kindle books. It's not really an option with web pages the way that it is with traditional books. And I'm not whining and crying about what we've lost or anything like that, because we've gained so much. But even before, when I was still teaching at university as a professor, I told people, if you're only going online for your research, you're not doing research. So much of human knowledge can never be on the internet, because hypertextuality pre-exists hyperlinks. It's called indexes, it's called encyclopedias, it's called the kinds of academic architecture and reference architecture that is only possible in actual printed material. And I don't know what the figures are anymore, but there was a time when it was something like less than 5% of all printed material was on the internet. And I cannot imagine that has increased that much. And this swamp of information that is just not optimized to create connections in the ways that actual books can. It's just self-evident that there's always going to be a place for print knowledge, and there's going to be a place for the kinds of connections that can only be created through print, and the kinds of connections that you can only create by getting deep and involved and making your own notes, your own notation systems. I've recommended some tips for you today that you can use to really elevate your practice. And then memorize in a higher way and unlock information from a linear structure so you can memorize it in different orders or refer to it in different orders, and then create what I like to think of as rhizomatic knowledge. And it's very, very powerful, very liberating, and it is a path to creating long-lasting neural networks that are stronger than any other path that I can think of or that I've seen. And I really admire all the attempts to create digital versions of this through spaced repetition softwares and so forth, but I just can't see it happening. I cannot see it even being remotely possible in the same way. But I'm happy to eat my words on that if it happens. And there's certainly other kinds of knowledge out there. But if you're not able to focus and concentrate, and you can't even finish a page without finishing without breaking your concentration, then you might need to explore alternatives, because you're a brilliant person. You're an absolute treasure to humanity, but you've got to seize upon that and find the ways where you can concentrate on books. So that's my answer to that, and I hope you find a way to end the problem that you're having, because there is a way to end it. There is a way. So let's hop on to our live stream. If you're hopping on, say hello, put the thumbs up there, and let's have a discussion. I'm having a great time so far, and I hope that helps common sense. Staring at pages for hours is really not that great. And again, just to sum up, I really started to read out loud. Then I started to learn to unlock the note-taking I was doing from a linear structure and then make it flexible, and then use that alinear structure for not only writing but also memorizing in a different way, as if that information was a deck of cards. And it's very powerful. So Nathan, thanks for these questions. Can you map onto books, possibly using a peg system for the page numbers? And I should say, is it wise to map data onto books? I don't find books as really that great of memory palaces. Now, there certainly is in the speed reading community and tradition the idea of marking pages. You can, and I've done it, you know, if you want to memorize what information what page certain information comes onto, then just use the major method to memorize the page number. But in terms of books as memory palaces or mapping onto books, I don't see that as, I see that as being too internal. Whereas what we want to do is we want to process, so there's a book, right? This is external to us. Then we want to internalize it, and then we want to externalize it so that we're processing it. And if we're internalizing from this book and then externalizing it back into the source, I don't think that's nearly as powerful as internalizing it and then externalizing it elsewhere. And so there are many elsewheres that you can externalize it to. So, for example, I could be reading this book and all these index cards, right? I could just memorize the information and then use the book as a memory palace. But then I'm locking it to that book. I'm locking it to its source. And that's going to, ultimately I don't really know, but my prediction is that's going to create too closed of a circuit. It needs to be free. It needs to be externalized elsewhere. And so the first thing to do is externalize it onto index cards, which then become flexible. If I want to memorize certain points or create a presentation from it, I can juggle, shift, discard, whatever, and have it as being externalized in a manipulable form and a memorizable form that then is internalized and externalized through memory palaces, which is getting spatial memory involved, spatial memory based on real places that exist in the world. This book is a location. It's definitely a location. By reading it, you're encoding it into the chemical locations of your brain. So now it's existing already in multiple locations. And then if you make the book a memory palace, you're locking it to one location. Whereas if you make even just one memory palace, you're then liberating it or connecting it or mapping it onto multiple locations in an external world that has an internal property, a mental image inside of your mind. And it has multiple mental images. So it has the mental images of space, it has the mental images of what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. Maybe there are smells and sounds involved, or tastes involved, and then there's concepts, and it's just super, super powerful. And yes, books have those things, but they're singular little places. Memory palaces, they're like giant canvases upon which you can work, make connections, make multiple connections. So yeah, books, people do use books as memory palaces, and you can do it. I just think it's extraordinarily limited, and it's not only extraordinarily limited, but it's not going to give you the benefits of the full memory exercise and fitness and options that having a solid memory palace network make for you. So this is all about creating multiple levels of connection so that you have massive mental literacy at the end, as opposed to really tight and constrained and limited things. And then of course there's the problem of ghosting and the problem of the ugly sister effect, for example. You avoid that by taking information and externalizing it where you have a bigger canvas. And so just to push this a little bit further, we know from the Big Five, right? So the Big Five of learning is reading, writing, speaking, and listening in a way that serves memory, and using memory to help guide the reading, writing, listening, and speaking that you do, to inform it, and so forth. Those are all powerful externalizations. The more that you're using those, the more information is just going to seep right in and create these rhizomatic connections and knowledge, rhizomatic knowledge. So super powerful. Let's see. Ben Johnson checking in. Hasn't read much of Bloom, usually through citations from others. Definitely read Bloom. If you had to read anything, Anatomy of Influence is good, but Anxiety of Influence is probably the book. And it really is not about poetry. It applies to film, it applies to painting, it applies to philosophy, it applies across the board. Really, really good book. Ben Johnson says, also wanted to say enjoy Shakespeare when you revisit it. Also thanks to Magnetic Memory Method and your memorizing poetry course. I recently memorized the Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow speech. Oh, well, that's Macbeth, right? Yeah, Macbeth is great. Tomorrow, tomorrow, and tomorrow. Yeah, I love Macbeth. It's a really, really good one. And these techniques are really, really great for that. Shakespeare, of course, is an interesting challenge too, because you have the different folios, and then you think, okay, I'm going to memorize this, and then I'm going to recite it, and then somebody's going to say, no, it goes this way. I've had that happen a few times, and I'm like, well, are you talking about folio A or B? But in any case, that's irrelevant. Same thing with the Iliad. When I like to recite Iliad, they're like, huh? But I'm actually fond of Dryden's translation of the Iliad, so it's lesser known. I think it's much more beautiful and well worth looking at. But so that's an issue that comes up in memorization. Anyway, Ben Johnson says it really works, and I loved the process from the course. Wanted to say thanks for that. Well, thank you for letting me know, Ben. I really appreciate that. Nathan says, don't forget to like the stream. Yeah, guys, hit thumbs up, be involved. If you have questions, Nathan says, thank you for the response. I hope it helps you. Ben Johnson says, I like Dryden's as well. Yeah, Dryden is. You know, these guys, these literary figures, I'm not at university anymore, so I don't know what the status of things are, but I have this feeling that it's all sort of lost to the sands of time. But I hope that these things are alive and well, and that the tradition stands, and new people are encountering these things. I know it's all in danger with all the identity politics stuff going on, and heaven forbid people are somehow rioting and protesting courses because they might be somehow involved in an agenda. I don't know, I'm sorry people, but people wrote stuff in the past, and we should just look at it and not get too involved in it. I think that one of the problems is that there's a lot there's an opportunity to be more scientific in literary studies and in humanities in general, and that really, really needs to be revisited, and not so much speculative, untestable claims. Now, there is a place for wild philosophizing and so forth, but it needs testing. And the peer review system is not as golden as it seems, apparently, because you can build up a network of scholars who will then peer review things and favor them, and so this comes down to a question of the problems in science, which is that people will often point out is that, well, there's corruption in science, and well, it's not that science is corrupted, it's that the people who are involved are corrupt. And so we need a better understanding of science. We need more science literacy, what science actually is. And so how that relates to memory training is that you be a scientist of your own memory training based on a very, very solid understanding of what science is. And science is creating evidence in support of claims. That's all it is, right? And if the evidence doesn't support the claim, then you need better evidence or you need better claims. But that's really at its core what science is, and therefore at its core what truth ultimately is. And so we need to understand that. And so Nathan says, I hope we don't see a book burning in the near future. Well, I think we can avoid it if we can all get a better understanding of what science really is and be more scientific in our lives and in our studies, and promote proper scientific literacy. Now, there are other elements to science, of course, and I don't mean to simplify it or anything like that, but in your own memory practice, that would be the core basis. And what's so beautiful about that is that the people who get and understand and do the best with memory techniques, they almost universally tend to be skeptical. And so those skeptics, when they test these techniques, they're being scientists. They're saying, so you can memorize 100 words in a week, or you can memorize 52 cards in 15 minutes, or whatever it is that they get in on. And they say, this is not possible. Like I myself said, and like many of the best were so skeptical of this. They absolutely are scientists because they want to provide evidence to support or deny the claim. And that is an absolute amazing thing when they dive in. And every person who goes into memory techniques and creates evidence either to support or deny the claim, they're being scientific. And so they say, okay, there's these memory techniques, I'll learn them, I'll start to use them. And your success is going to be indexed against a number of factors, such as, do you really care about the information that you're learning? Do you have a learning goal that you're applying it to? Like my criticism of so many of the memory training material out there is, it's like, hey, let's memorize a shopping list or a random list of words that have nothing of interest to you. Well, if you struggle with that, no doubt, I mean, what possible quick victory are you going to have memorizing pencil, sheep, torpedo, and fish? Find something. When you find those things in the memory trainings, just replace the example with the list words with information that might actually benefit you. So that's like a number one core piece of advice. Be scientific with something that's going to immediately impact your life. Now, the downside of that is that you might choose things that are a little bit too ambitious. So there's wisdom at a certain level in choosing these topics, just random words. But at its core, you want to get an actual quick victory because you're bringing together training your memory with material, remembering material that actually makes a difference, that actually matters. That's one of the most powerful things that you can possibly ever do. It's a really key, important thing. So Ben Johnson says, would you recommend learning both folios at once or just picking your favorite version? Would you put both in the same memory palace, or would that invite potential conflicts? I wouldn't memorize multiple folios. I mean, I don't really see what the advantage would be unless that you were doing some kind of radical experimental play where you were going to contradict yourself live on stage and recite variations on the lines. Otherwise, if you're going to memorize lines from Shakespeare, pick the ones that resonate most with you, or that are the assignment, or are used in the play. And even used in plays, I mean, we know that a director might say, let's change it a little bit. I don't think that necessarily these things are meant to be verbatim at the end of the day. I mean, Shakespeare certainly verbatim as such, but there are options, there are choices, and then there are elisions made as a routine matter of course. So it is it's an interesting question. About how much King Lear in German did I memorize in the end? Oh, well, very, very interesting. Not a whole lot in the end, but it's a great read, and I ultimately got rid of all my books, so I don't have that particular edition that I had anymore. But yeah, King Lear in German is awesome. And you know what also is awesome is Hamlet. I saw a great production of Hamlet, and it really is a project to think of memorizing Hamlet's soliloquy auf Deutsch. But it is a beautiful, beautiful language. You know, there's a line in Star Trek, I'm sure it's Star Trek 6, which is the 6th movie, which is that, you know, you simply haven't you haven't experienced Shakespeare, you haven't enjoyed Shakespeare unless you've read it in the original Klingon, which I think is really great. But yeah, it's something to revisit. I've thought recently about maybe going and studying acting so that there is a reason to memorize more of that kind of material, the kind of material that would be spoken on a stage or would be recited in acting, to get a better sense of what actors struggle with, because it's been a long time since I acted. And it is fascinating. And the memory demands are a little bit different in acting because, there are schools of thought in acting. We know that a lot of the great actors don't actually memorize their lines. So, for example, De Niro has his lines on index cards, typically. And he doesn't really see his role as an actor as being a person who memorizes lines, but rather being a person who is truthful in the moment. So Dustin Hoffman tells a story about working with De Niro and watching De Niro with his cards in his pocket and putting the cards away, and he would just say the line as soon as they said action, or whenever it was appropriate to say the line in action, without having memorized it, but rather refreshed whatever it was, and then being true to that particular expression. So that's movies, which is different than plays, but I'm very interested in actually maybe going and doing some acting, because the thing is also with acting is that you would use the memorization process to get it into long-term memory so that you're not recalling on stage, right? And same thing with poetry recitation. When you're reciting a poem, you don't, like if you wanted to even just say a couple of lines from a poem, like Aus nichts kann nichts entspringen from King Lear in German, right? You don't want to be like thinking, okay, so what were all those images? You just want to pop it out, right? So there's this kind of odd idea that people get, and I don't know where they get it from, that you're going to be accessing memory palaces during recall. That's not the point of it. That's not, you can do that. You absolutely can do that. And it is a benefit of the technique, but ultimately the technique is to get it into long-term memory so that you're not accessing the memory palaces when you need to recall that sort of stuff. So you want to, as quickly as possible, and there are procedures that you follow in order to make it happen, and they're quite powerful, is you make sure that you've memorized, use the tools of mnemonics, whatever the techniques you're using, and then have a fluidity of use through the Big Five that creates fluency in whatever that topic is. So there's as much fluency in poetry recitation as there is in having a conversation in a different language. And so you get that through using the memory techniques in the appropriate way to create the outcome that you're looking for. And it's not to create some giant internal reference machine, even though it has that effect. But you want it to be deeper. You want those connections to be deeper. And that's what ultimately the memory connection is all about, is making those connections super ultra deep. Van Johnson says, thank you so much for the Bloom recommendation. Totally agree with you about the unfortunate way older texts are pushed aside because of distasteful views, but I suppose the canon has always been shifting since inception. Yes, I think that's true. And in many ways, ideas are always in danger, and the feeling of their danger now may be so present and prevalent simply because of the speed of the media and how that circulates this current present danger, clear and present danger, if we can make a little movie reference there. But yeah, it's certainly an issue that we need help with, for sure. So if you're just hopping on, say hello, hit the thumbs up, let me know where you are in the world, and if you have any questions, just as a little update for you all, if you haven't heard the new episode of the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, how vital are vitamins for memory, go to magneticmemorymethod.com, listen to that episode. There's a special treat in there for you, and well, I'll leave it as a surprise for you, but you'll only encounter that special treat if you listen to the episode. And I think it's an important message. How vital are vitamins for memory improvement? The answer may shock you, because there's a lot of danger out there that a lot of people are putting themselves in, their brain health, not just their memory. There's a lot of misconceptions around it. I don't pretend to know it all, and there's no medical advice there, but you want to get this sorted, and there is a very, very special treat for people who listen to that episode, and that is at magneticmemorymethod.com right now, the new episode, How Vital Are Vitamins for Memory Improvement. you can just, it's probably picked up by Google by now, and I really appreciate you hitting the like buttons and the share buttons and leaving a comment. And it's got a comment already that I just will approve now. Anderson says, "Another great podcast, Anthony. I follow this diet for memory improvement," and he shared a link there. "It involves quite a lot of medical testing and seems to be an empirically proven approach." And so I'll be looking at that, but you can go and join that conversation. It's the top post at magneticmemorymethod.com, and listen to the episode for that special surprise. It is a very special surprise indeed, and I think you'll enjoy it. And I'd love to know what you think about how vital vitamins are for memory improvement as well. William Butler's here. Oh, William, how are you doing? "For scheduling planning purposes, do you announce these live presentations in advance?" Scheduling is for people who are in the masterclass and for people who are part of the Memory Connection community. So YouTube Live is not that way. But I believe now that you are in the masterclass, so please stay tuned. You know, this is a huge problem right now. It's a huge problem, and it has to do with corporate control over your inbox. So Google decides what messages you see, and it's very, very difficult to try and keep in touch with everybody. So I'm trying to work out a reasonable way to do that. That's part of what the Memory Connection is all about, is actually being able to reach people without having the interference of Google and so forth. So if you're on my email list, you decided to be on my email list, and now Google and the powers that be are deciding whether or not you're even going to see the messages that you might receive. I find that not only intellectually dangerous, anti-intellectual, because you and myself, this isn't just about you, it's about me too, because I subscribe to things and I'm missing out because those people are trying to send messages that aren't even being received. And that's because someone else decides which box they should go into and which promotions folder, and even if it should be shown at all. Same thing on Facebook. You might join a group, or you might this, that, the other thing, and they're deciding whether you're going to see it or not. If you're subscribed to YouTube, 30% of the people who are subscribed to this channel will be shown when something goes live or not, and it's just bizarre. It's a bizarre. We're in the upside down, as a lot of people are fond of saying these days. So how am I going to combat this? Well, I created this Memory Connection project. You can learn more about it at magneticmemorymethod.com/connect, so that the people who want to be reached are going to get reached, regardless of what the internet overlords say. I find it really, really troubling, and again, anti-intellectual. If I subscribe to someone's email list, I do not need the intervention of an internet superpower deciding whether or not I'm going to receive their messages or not, and where in my inbox they're going to place it in this or that folder. This is very, very strange, especially when I have signed up for courses with people and then I'm not able to receive the messages that they sent. It's very, very strange. So in any case, the YouTube lives are generally just done, and there are, and in 2018 this is going to be much more regularized and sorted. The 2 sessions monthly that will happen on the second Friday of every month, and then the final day, usually the final day of each month for the seal of approval. Those will be the 2 scheduled sessions, and information about being on them and getting the replays and so forth will be there. So that's at magneticmemorymethod.com, all the information about that. But do be aware of this issue. I think it's the hysteria over messages is really, really really crazy right now. So, you know, we know that people have had their accounts banned just because of the kinds of things that they're saying, and that's not a healthy culture. It's not what the internet is about. DJ's here. Hello. From New York City. Love your stuff. The more I read and try, the more I love it. Well, thanks for saying that, DJ, and thank you for being here. You've been a supporter for so long, and I'm grateful to interact with you here live now. And if you're just jumping on the call, say hello where you are in the world. Hit that thumbs up button. Let me know what you're doing and what you're thinking. And yeah, really appreciate having a great session with you all now. Thanks for being here. And do let me know if you have any questions. We've covered some of the most common questions. Basically, how do you craft more time? And you get involved in crafting time. Time is a craft. And again, coming up soon, I did an interview with the Productivityist podcast, and that was really great. I'm looking forward to that coming out to you. If you don't know that podcast, definitely check it out. It's hosted by a fellow Canadian, Mike Vardy, and really great. Had a great time, and can't wait for that to be released late February 2018, and just a great thing to be invited on such a big show, and more of these things are happening, and it's thanks to you people for supporting this work. I'm grateful for it. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, please do let me know. If you have the memory connection, please stay tuned for an email. Please check in your spam folders or your promotion folders if things are going awry, because the next seal of approval is coming up, and I'd love for you to be there because it's much more fun live, and we're going to get into some very powerful techniques from this book. And if you want to be part of the seal of approval, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/connect. Let me send you one of these. And there's a reason why that it needs to be sent, not PDF'd. Although, if you listen to the most recent episode of the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, you'll get a little special treat. It's about halfway through, but don't skim. Dive in. The Chaos Candle. Wow, what a great name. The Chaos Candle. I love this. Thank you for saying hello and for being here. Do you do self-help stuff? And from Nova Scotia, so a fellow Canadian. And Dylan Wilson says, fellow Canadians, yeah. Canadians are awesome. And that's not just because we are Canadians, but I think that they're just generally perceived as being pretty awesome. Maybe that's because we say sorry all the time, and we're modest and so forth. I was listening to, have you ever heard the Dayglow Abortions song, Proud to be Canadian? Proud to be a Canadian. Pass me another Eskimo, I think, something like this. Anyway, so about the question from the Chaos Candle, do I do self-help stuff? Well, I'm not sure what you mean by do I do self-help stuff, but if that means do I read self-help books? Yeah, a lot of them actually. And do I follow up on their recommendations when they're sensible, and sometimes even when they're not sensible? Yes, because I'm scientific in nature, and even off-the-wall stuff sometimes sounds like it'd be worth giving a try. And I've actually told in my own self-help program that I created, told a story of some of the off-the-wall things I experimented with. And there's a lot of strange things in human experience, and it can't all be explained necessarily in a dried and pat way that we would like, but there's usually some kind of Occam's razor, there's some kind of reasonable explanation, and those are often, for many people, deeply unsatisfying. But I think if you get in touch with reality, they actually are the most satisfying answers of all. So really, self-help, when it is treated scientifically, is very powerful. And I think that a lot of self-help stuff is frowned upon in ways that are undeserved, and it's one of the great paradoxes and dilemmas of the universe, which is that we're constantly reading articles and so forth of science catching up with ancient wisdom and demonstrating deep validity of claims that were made thousands of years ago. Now, of course, the problem is that we also have science helping us cut away many things that have been claimed for thousands of years ago, and those things that need to be removed are being ignored because the irrationality of belief and so forth being so strong, and the deep roots of irrationality is just unbelievable how what a hold it has on reality. But in terms of like self-help, sure. Like right now I'm reading Crucial Conversations. It's essentially a book that helps you have better conversations. So yeah, I would call that a self-help book, and I think that self-help gets a bad name. One of my favorite authors is Richard Weissman, and the opening pages of 59 Seconds, it's really odd because he really takes a flamethrower to a lot of self-helpy world stuff, and yet he then presents a bunch of scientific evidence that validates a lot of what goes on in the self-help world, but it comes with a kind of nose in the air, or it's got a weird feeling to it. And I love Richard Weissman. I'm not even being critical of him, but I find that there's a snootiness and a snottiness in a lot of stuff that just, man, well, you know what, it needs to be there. So keep it up. And I myself have done it myself. There was a reaction from a fan of the magnetic memory method when I talked on the podcast about memorizing the horoscope, and I talked about that this is something you can do, and if you're a mentalist, hopefully an ethical mentalist, that can be a very powerful thing to have in memory, but deeply unethical to actually go around claiming that the horoscope is in any way premised upon the real world. That's just dangerous, and I never heard from him since. I used to hear from him frequently. You can go find that and read his comments. And he basically just said, if you're gonna talk about this, why bring a negative slant to it at all? Or just avoid the topic. But the reality is that, and I think Richard Weissman probably has this in 59 Seconds, is that there really are better and worse ways to approach things, and we want to push towards the better ones. This is what it appears to be happening anyway, as science takes over irrational belief and makes irrational belief much, much less palatable for so many people. So yes, I do self-help, but I do it as scientifically as possible. We're all flawed in our ways, but we reduce and minimize our flaws by the strength of external devices that do not require our opinions, that do not require the involvement of our flaws. And that's, again, we were talking earlier about what exactly science is. It's the production of evidence that supports claims, and everything is subject and suspect to future evidence that will either confirm, alter, or deny the claim, right? And that's what good self-help is. So basically, it's just a word, right? Why do people use words? Well, to make them feel safe. We've got a category. This belongs to self-help. This belongs to philosophy. This belongs to math. This belongs to that and the other thing, right? Well, okay, math and philosophy, they bridge in certain ways where we could come up with another term, natural philosophy perhaps, or physics or whatever, right? But the whole thing is that if you really, really look at Heidegger and the best parts of Heidegger, the difference between philosophy and self-help in there is so minimal. It's just that it's using a lot of philosophical language and terminology, and it's just self-help, but we call it philosophy, and we call it philosophy because he speaks in philosophical terms, refers to philosophical texts. But one of the things that he refers to that is so powerful is the concept of aletheia, which is a Greek word that is very complicated to really give one definition, but it means truth, but it means truth in a particular way, in the way of unhiding. So when light is cast upon something, it doesn't necessarily illuminate it so much as it cuts away the darkness surrounding something. And that's a very powerful way of thinking about what truth is. And it basically is a scientific way, because it is the production through the elimination of darkness to the truth that exists, and creating evidence that supports the claim that truth is trying to ground, to found, to continue, or to alter, or to get rid of, right? And so this aletheia, light as a curative force, is very, very powerful. And I believe that the word guru actually comes from a similar sort of thing, where guru has now come to have different things, meanings that are negative and not as attractive anymore. But really it means the one who banishes darkness, I believe, is the origin of that term, or the bringer of light. But not the bringer of light to illuminate things necessarily, but rather to have tools for banishing the darkness. it's interesting when you spin things around in your mind and so forth. So is philosophy self-help? In many cases, yes, it is. And the extent to which self-help is philosophical, I don't know, but self-help certainly is at its best when it's scientific in nature. And the blight on most self-help is that a lot of those people are willing to accommodate irrationality that simply does not belong in any rational person's. It just doesn't belong, period, in the world. It's part of humanity for sure, but the sooner that we can just isolate it, identify it when it happens, and get past it, get beyond it, get it out of the picture, the better we're all going to be. We're going to be way better off because it's just not necessarily needed. It leads to so much suffering, and suffering is just so unnecessary. Gabriel says, thanks, Anthony. I have all your courses. I'm a trainer of memory for older people. Well, nice to meet you, Gabriel, and thank you for being an educator of memory, and I'd love to hear more about that. That sounds absolutely fascinating. And good work. Please keep it up and keep me informed, and be in touch. Ben says, do you keep a written list of all your bridging figures, or are they all there in your memory? Do you regularly reuse them in various memory palaces? Great question. Here's the thing with bridging figures. You will do yourself a huge favor by having an ongoing cultivation of them in writing. So write down your bridging figures. Not only that, but write down the things that your bridging figures could do and have them run the gamut. So hammer, axe, ice, fire, water, smog, fog, kick, spit, scream, kiss, jump, punch, all that stuff, right? And the more that you play around with that in your mind, you can, and you do it, get it out on paper and so forth. We talked earlier about the difference between internalizing and externalizing, and then externalizing internalized information and internalizing externalized information as just a process of mapping and remapping to strengthen the connections. This is fundamental to progress in life. What you want to do is definitely do that. So I'm constantly writing down bridging figures and thinking about them, and I hardly sit through a movie without thinking bridging figure, and then starting to play, rotating, possibilities, options. And if you wanted to, and I've done this in the past, I haven't done it recently, but if you had if you have an A to Z of bridging figures and they're your go-to person for that letter, then you can just get a new one like Hulk and then start it with A, right? So Albert Einstein and Batman and Corey Hart and so forth. Go through the alphabet. So now Hulk is beating up Albert Einstein. Now Hulk is spitting on Batman. Now Hulk is kissing Corey Hart, and so forth, right? And D is Dracula, right? And you just run through the gamut. It's great mental exercise. Absolutely fantastic. And there's a lot. Like, the alphabet is an unbelievable tool. It is such a great tool for mental fitness. It's a great tool for mnemonics. There are multiple ways to use it. It is spatial in some sense. It can be mapped onto space. It can be multiply connected and interconnected and unconnected and reconnected, and it's just such a wonderful device. It is so powerful. I haven't even begun to document all the possible ways that the alphabet can be an asset. Although if you're in the masterclass and you go to the FAQ section, a lot of that has been unpacked in multiple ways in our various FAQs there. And really, really, really lovely what just the endlessness of the alphabet. And then, of course, you get more out of it when you learn more alphabets, and then when you start encountering other cultures, you know, when you immerse in learning another language, and then all of a sudden you learn about all these different people, and then you have more bridging figures that can be used in more ways. It's delightful. It's absolutely delightful. And if you got the November newsletter of the Magnetic Memory Method newsletter, then there's some very interesting tools there for getting more bridging figures and getting more memory palaces. And now that I think about it, something to be included in the December newsletter is to extend that technique in a different way. So thank you for that question. That's really great. And there are just endless things to do with bridging figures that oh wow, that's another idea. Great. So yeah, bridging figures are awesome, and
one of the cool things is that, the world of memory itself is filled with so many potential bridging figures. And so imagine that if you got yourself familiar, if you had a reading program and you got yourself familiar with so many of the different figures in the world of memory themselves, and you start using them as bridging figures, I mean, this is super empowering, because they all have character and they all have their own little passion projects and really great characters. Pointless says, "Are you Jake Paul in disguise?" Well, since that we've only got a small amount of people here on the call and only a small amount of thumbs up. By the way, hit that thumbs up if you're engaged. Let me know where you are in the world. I don't think I'm Jake Paul, but you never know. He could be an interesting bridging figure. I'll have to watch more of his videos. I mean, why not? Why not? I think that it would obviously be a great boost to my work if Jake Paul and I could do a memory session together. Maybe, well, teach him how to memorize some cards or learn a foreign language or something like that. That could certainly be fun. Yeah, but thanks. I think that I'm going to take that as a compliment. Why not? Jake Paul could be an interesting bridging figure for sure. And why not? Why not? You feed yourself endlessly, and I appreciate that comment, because it gives me an opportunity to think, yeah, he could be a good bridging figure. I'll have to go and check him out more. And one of the reasons to do that also is to get better at making videos and so forth, which I'd like to do. And I'm always thinking, what would be, the great show about memory techniques that would be something like that? Maybe more Casey Neistat, not so much Jake Paul, but why not? If that suits one's personality and so forth. So that's something interesting to think about. Yeah. So not really a memory improving question there, but if you go and use Jake Paul as a bridging figure, then absolutely that can help improve your memory. And it makes me think about Pee Wee Herman and all the characters from Pee Wee Herman's Playhouse and some of the Pee Wee movies. There's just so many things that start to come to mind when you allow yourself to mind wander over things like that. So he's not necessarily connected in any literal way, but at the same time, he is very connected because the mind makes it so. And when you learn to associate and free associate and have connections on end, you'll be so fast with creating your mnemonics, your magnetic imagery. And as long as you're prepared, if you dig your wells before you're thirsty and you have a nice, plump, vibrant memory palace network working for you, you'll never be at a loss when push comes to shove. You will be like the samurai who is always prepared to execute one last move, even with your head cut off, and you will have great learning and memory experiences. So yeah, another tool in the toolbox. Jake Paul in disguise. I have a picture of him in my mind, but I'm gonna have a little quick look on Jake Paul. Yeah. Well, my hair would need to be shortened and dyed, and I'd need to wear more camouflage, apparently. And it looks like he eats food that is not very memory friendly. Speaking of memory friendly foods, if you haven't checked out the most recent episode of the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, go and check that out. How vital are vitamins for memory improvement? There's a special surprise for people who are listeners to the Magnetic Memory Method podcast. It's about halfway through the episode, and I'd be delighted if you avail yourself of that surprise. It's an interesting thing to be a podcaster. We are nearing, I never really keep stats on these things, but we're nearing 200 episodes. And I'm really excited for the 200th episode. Next week, we're doing crossword puzzles. And Binary Digit Man says, I can't remember why I opened this video. Well, you're in the right place, because we're coming up with a new course called How to Learn and Memorize Why You Did What You Did, and how to make sure that you do it again if it was good. And if it was good, then hit that thumbs up button and leave a comment. Get involved in the discussion. And snark has its place in the world, and I enjoy it as much as the next guy. But yeah, so the podcast is rocking and rolling. I'm so excited for the 200th episode, but next week is going to be crossword puzzles. Then we're going to talk about the memory challenges, the learning challenges around cryptocurrency. Really super excited and interested about that. Going to have a special guest to help unpack why it's so hard to understand and what we need to understand about it. What are the risks and the opportunities and the challenges yet to come around that topic. And you know, one of the things about being involved in the future is that it gives you more to learn and it gives you more connections. And being part of the future is very important in terms of having life satisfaction and safety, and you know, putting a little skin in the game is a very, very good virtue. So yeah, interesting. It's going to be interesting. So next week is crossword puzzles, then the memory challenges and the learning challenges of cryptocurrency, and some tips on how to manage that massive information overwhelm that's coming from that. Even if you're not interested in it and so forth, I think you'll find some benefit there. There's an older episode about memorizing passwords with Brad Zupp that is going to relate to this, because cryptocurrency comes into issues of password security and really, really fascinating stuff, and a lot to learn. But I was able to learn a lot very, very quickly, and so that guest is going to be great, and I'm excited about it. And I haven't quite decided yet what's going to be the 200th episode, but I hope that you'll all go and check out today's episode, because today is today, and How Vital Are Vitamins for Memory Improvement has a nice little special surprise for you. Maybe listen about halfway through, and even if you just go and enjoy the written version, that's great as well. I appreciate that. Hit those like buttons, those thumbs up, and share that post around. Get involved in the discussion. I'd love to discuss with you there as well. And I really appreciate all of the discussion that we're having now as well. So Dylan asks, could you define a bridging figure? It sounds like the common ground of a metaphor between the vehicle and the tenor. A vehicle is the word used for the metaphor. Tenor is the symbolic content reference. Well, yeah, vehicle and tenor, or tone and tenor, also maybe we could bring into play. Those are perhaps related, but I think we can simplify it a lot more than that. A bridging figure. Well, first of all, bridging figures are used in memory palaces. They're used specifically in memory palaces. This is a term that I came up with, and they are part of magnetic imagery in a magnetic memory method palace. So we need to establish first and foremost that this is a memory tool in the magnetic memory method world. And I'll just read here from the memory connection in the glossary of select terms that bridging figure is a figure, such as a celebrity or historical person, used in several associative images, magnetic imagery, to help with recall along a memory palace journey. So that's what it is. And you know, I could have extended that, and when I do the second printing I will, because it doesn't need to be a celebrity or a historical person. It could be a person that you know, a friend, a family member. It could even be a fantasy person like Homer Simpson, and I've used Homer Simpson very successfully. And you don't have to have met them. It helps if you can see them in your mind, but as those of us who use memory techniques know, you don't need to actually see anything in your mind. You just need to be able to conceive of it. And you have many other modalities other than vision. It's not purely an image-based thing. So basically, you create a well-formed memory palace with a well-formed memory palace journey. Think of it almost like a train track. The train always goes along the same path, although we don't do that in the magnetic memory method, but we do have it's magnetic for a reason. Like, it's magnetized in place. It's relatively fixed. And the bridging figure goes from station to station. It bridges that journey between station 1 and station 2. And you have so much power with that in terms of making things both more memorable when you're doing the encoding and more recallable when you're doing the decoding. So encoding is when you create magnetic imagery and you put everything together. What is this doing scientifically? Well, we know that it's helping your brain make connections with spatial memory, autobiographical memory, episodic memory, systemic memory, oh, Harry Potter. Really? That's the nicest thumbs up we've had all day. You know, that's a really fascinating reaction to some session here we're having about memory. Interesting. Okay, so anyway, we got all these different levels of memory, and all of you who are watching the live stream, please don't put up with that kind of behavior. That's we're going to have to get a moderator on here to manage that, because that's not only unnecessary, but needs to really be managed, or at least justified. If you have a good solid reason for speaking like that, you know, do explain yourself. And I hope those of you who are there on the live will respond as you fit to behavior like this. In any case, yeah, I hope that answers the question about the bridging figure. It's just a way of helping your brain in the encoding process and the decoding process, and it allows you to just have much more flexibility. It allows you to have more to work with, and it creates more connection in your memory palace journey, and it's a fascinating asset. And of course, you can have multiple bridging figures. You can have them pass the baton, as I like to call it, within a journey, and encode at deeper and deeper levels as a result. And you know, a lot of people they argue in the memory science, the memory training, you should do more on the encoding if you want it to go into long-term memory. And then other people say, no, you should do more with the decoding if you want it to go into long-term memory. I think this is just an odd and useless conversation. The reality is that you need to do all that it takes to make sure you know what you need to do on a case-by-case basis to make sure that the encoding and decoding are efficient. And so if you're finding that things aren't working out for you, hello, it's probably because you're just not doing things comprehensively properly. So it's not ever, well, the encoding wasn't right or the decoding wasn't right. It has to do with your whole approach. It has to do with how you actually do things comprehensively. And it has to do with diligence to the actual act of memorizing, using these techniques for memorizing. If you're not doing those things, and you're not getting the outcome that you want, then think about what is it that you're not doing, and what tools don't you have? What could you add to this in order to strengthen your practice, to get more out of it, and absolutely succeed? You know, I want to raise this thing about this comment that came here, which I'm not going to repeat, but I just want to say something to all that are here. There's a real anonymous behavior that we all know on the internet. We know that it's called trolling and so forth, but I don't sit silently by when it happens. I think that the people who hide behind their little graphic icons and their fake names, like Harry Potter here with his News 9 graphic, I think you're really cowardly and strange. So if you care to engage, and you know, even if you email me privately, whatever problem it is you have that causes you to speak that way, then that would be much more courageous of you than rather coming on to essentially a public classroom here and staining it with whatever issue it is that you have. And it's okay to have issues in life, but have the courage to approach the people, or at least the person who is creating this gathering, namely myself, and speak like a human to another human with whatever issue causes you to do that, because there's probably a civil option that would be much more memorable than this, because we're all going to forget about this. But if you want to cause change in the world, there's ways to make that happen. If you want things to be different, there's ways to make that happen. And if you've got a problem, there's ways to get rid of those problems. So be a human of courage, and follow up if you're still here on that, and bring your best, because this is something that really needs to be addressed. It's just morally disgusting what people do under the guise of online anonymity sometimes, and you abuse the privilege of online anonymity when you do these kinds of things. So I hope to have an email from Harry Potter and some explanation of this so that we can have progress in the world and not random acts of online violence like that. So, moving on, DJ says, I've been shy for a very long time, but Potter needs to go home since apparently he has nothing to contribute. Well, thank you for speaking up. I appreciate that. This is something that just wouldn't be tolerated in an internet or in a brick and mortar university classroom, and shouldn't be tolerated anywhere really. And I don't tolerate it. I accept that it happens. It does, but really, that's something that I hope will be backed up with some courage. And I was listening to a Jordan Peterson video, a lecture, and a student actually got up and he said to Jordan Peterson, "What did you think about this article?" And he named an article that apparently Peterson was familiar with, and he said. He asked, what he thought about it, and he described the claim, the accusations that the article made, and so forth. And then Peterson gave a long response about how, in a very measured, I think, and fair response, but a critical one about the things that were in that article and so forth. And that guy, that kid, had the courage to say, well, now I feel really badly about having written that article. And everybody in the room laughed and laughed and laughed, and it was a great way of... it was a great comeback in what the kid said. But then Peterson said, are you serious? And the kid said, yeah, I really did write that article. And Peterson said, wow, you are a very courageous person. And I thought, this is just extraordinary. It's extraordinary that that kid did that. And you can't help but admire him because he owned his snark. And I think that if our society, our societies rather, and our civilizations are going to progress, you got to have bigger balls than that. And if you're going to hide behind anonymity with your snark, I mean, come on, we've got better things to do. And again, you'll be remembered by the actual courage that you put out into the world, rather than the forgettable nonsense like this that is just going to be forgotten. So Ben Johnson says, probably a drive-by troll. Go back to Hogwarts, Harry. Yeah, I think so, but nonetheless, I paused all of this to point that out because I think it's one of the most important things that we can do. Is we've got to point it out for what it is. It's just morally disgusting, and these things will probably never stop. But nonetheless, it's whatever. It's not something that we should let idly pass by. I have a colleague actually in the blogging world who received some very, very, I didn't read it myself, but by her account, some very disturbing hate mail. And she was sort of looking for some wisdom about what to do about it. And I said, I'm sorry that happened to you, but I think that you've got to do something about it. You've got to say something about it. And even if you don't email that person back, because of the nature of her blog about it and let people know that this happened. You don't have to get into specifics, but don't accept it. Don't stand idly by. Oh, we're 100 years off, or more than 100 years off from some of the darkest tragedies of the modern era. And it's because people stood idly by while nonsense and crap like that was going out. No. I'm not going to stand idly by. It's not good. It's not good to be passive and accept it and just go, oh, well, it's just internet troll behavior. No, it's more than that. It's connected to the larger inaction that people with social inattention are guilty of, and we need to do something about it. Because what else do we have to remember except for the good things that we bring in life? We don't need more bad things to remember. And when we let social inattention cause us to not speak out to negative things in the world, then we're actually giving ourselves more reason to remember terrible things that happen, when we can have more reason to remember good things that happen. Okay, so that speech over. Ben Johnson says, better to acknowledge the problem instead of ignore it. I agree. Thank you so much for that, and thank you, DJ, for also chipping in. Any other questions? If you're just hopping on live now and you caught the brunt of that speech, well, you can look through the live stream and see what that was all about. Falco says, watching from Brazil, have you ever heard of CogMed for working memory? I haven't, but why don't we look it up? CogMed. Is it an online device, app, program? Probably. Working memory training, CogMed. Evidence-based intervention for improving working memory. Breakthrough research and expert coaches help people overcome attention deficits. And now it's attention deficits. Studies consistently show that most people with attention deficits have a working memory deficit. Well, sure. I mean, if this is the fundamental rule of all memory. If you can't pay attention, then you can never encode it into memory in the first place. We started this with the talk about, having problems focusing on a page and so forth. Anyway, thank you for asking about CogMed, Falco. I will look more into it. I am immediately hopeful when it says evidence-based program for improving attention. I don't know how that they do that, but I will look into it and look into the research and see what it is they're doing, and if there's an opportunity to reach out and potentially talk to them on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, I will do that. Pearson, if it is connected to the Pearson, might be more difficult to get in touch with someone, but I am very suspicious about digital amnesia, and I don't know that an app is really necessary, or how an app really will have the potential to solve the problem that apps are causing. But it's possible, and I certainly support the investigation into it. I had Gabriel Weiner on the podcast not too long ago, and I got some flack from people, courageously emailed with their real names, and they said, you're so against apps and stuff, why would you even talk to him about the app that he's creating for language learning? And it's not that I'm against them. I totally encourage people cracking that puzzle. Just, are they, And so we'll see. And so this CogMed could be very, very opportune. And one thing that jumps out at me is that it has coaching. So that certainly is more than locked in a device. And they certainly have, at least on the websites that I'm looking at here, they have an Australian address. So that could be very opportune and very interesting. So Dylan says we are attention, we are spirit. We are in many ways, yes, the quality of the attention that we pay to the present moment, and the consistency with which we have a quality of attention to pay to the present moment. And the more that we increase the quality of the attention that we pay to the present moment, the more the quality of the present moment increases, and on top of that, the more likely we are to remember naturally and on autopilot without the intervention of memory techniques. And on top of that, when we do use memory techniques, the higher quality of the techniques we bring to the game based on the quality of the attention that we've paid. Maybe I am Jake Paul in disguise with a long riff like that. But I've been practicing. So that is my answer to that. And just practice being in the present moment. It's a huge asset. Cultivate it in the ways that you have available to you. Try different ways. We know that some sort of dogma about memorizing this way or that way isn't really the answer. We know that there are different meditations that will apply and appeal to different, let's call them meditation styles, just as there are different learning styles and different media preferences, different sensory preferences. And it's really up to us to be the ones who dive in and explore. And the whole idea that people do not have a meditation practice is just astounding to me. The evidence, both anecdotal and on paper, and just evident from the quality of the people who espouse meditation, is just overwhelming and astounding. And it's not that there are kinds of meditation that are for no one. There is a kind of meditation for everyone and anyone. And so Dylan just shared a link here. Thanks for that. freemeditation.com. Falco says he'll send a link. Great. That's what this is about, sharing good things in the live stream. Thank you for doing that, and for helping people find things. And just be a skeptic. but be a scientific skeptic, one who tests, one who explores, and one of the problems that is out there is that people think that scientific-minded people are closed-minded because they always want evidence. Well, what more open-mindedness could you ever be than to want evidence and to be open to evidence, and to, I mean, it's just there in abundance for meditation. So meditate. Find the kind of meditation for you. Be a seeker of the kind of meditation that will work for you, because it will make everything better. It has memory benefits, and it will enable such a powerful and wonderful experience. It's just a journey of its own, and it makes life more memorable because you're paying attention to life better. You're more present. Harvinder's here. Hi, Harvinder. Good to see you here. Thanks for being here. I am doing well. He says, hello, Anthony. How are you doing? I'm doing very, very well. You missed some drama here, but it was a worthy drama, I think. And yeah, looking forward to the seal of approval coming up soon, and I hope you'll be able to be there. We're looking at a very exciting book, and I've got at least this many things to share out of it. It'll be a great time. So stay tuned for the notification about that by email. And yeah, great session, guys. And wonderful to meet with you. It is a time of gratitude and thanksgiving, and I certainly appreciate the spirit of gratitude that we can all share at a time like this. And I love that I've seen so many emails go out from people who aren't even part of the world that is acknowledging this Thanksgiving time. I know that I'm in a different time zone, and maybe you're watching this at a time when it isn't Thanksgiving, but I think that gratitude is a memory tool, very much so. And the more that you practice gratitude and actually journal your gratitude, it is absolutely incredible as a memory tool. And we mentioned Richard Weissman earlier, and in 59 Seconds he talks about the role of memory for journaling, and actually how it changes your perception of time. You'll have to experience it for yourself. Be a scientist. Give it a try. If you haven't read 59 Seconds, I mean, get in there. Do it. Read it from cover to cover. And if you do daily journaling, your perception of time will shift and change. And it's amazing. Oh, I see some things here coming up about Gabriel, because Gabriel is a memory educator himself. And DJ says, congratulations to Gabriel. Hats off for what you did and what you do. Again, I second that. Some more congratulations. And it is an achievement to be out there and sharing memory techniques. So keep up the good work. And looks like the lunchtime is about to begin. We're going to symbolically put some Thanksgiving grace on it, and that'll be my last suggestion to you, is that if you're not practicing gratitude, if you're not using some kind of memory journal, and you don't have space in your journaling or a journal for gratitude journaling, do that. It will give you a much more positive aspect on life. It'll give you more to remember. It'll help you remember on a daily basis all the things you have to be grateful for, and it will attenuate and attune you on the present moment, and then you will be better able to pay attention to the present moment, which already gives you a memory advantage of such extraordinary power, and you just don't want to go through life without that. So I highly recommend it, and it's like a daily activation guide. It's very difficult to feel poorly for too long, and you know what? You don't have to do it just once a day. You can do it multiple times during the day, and you can train yourself that when times feel tough or rough, just go and write down the things that are good and then really focus on them. And that's what I'll leave you with, because so much of our issues in life are that we are dwelling on the negative, and there's so much positive to be dwelt upon. And you can remind yourself just by having a simple journal, and I like to write down 10 things every day that I'm grateful for, and one of those things that I write down is you, as as the part of the audience of this project of teaching and making memory techniques known to larger people, and you should know you're very, very appreciated at every level that you participate and that you support and get involved. And again, there is danger. I don't want to exaggerate it. I see nothing but hope as more people are getting involved in the mnemonics renaissance. They're learning these techniques, they're preserving the tradition, they're expanding upon the tradition. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger year after year. I'm so excited about it. I'm excited by every person who participates, even if it's just to learn the techniques to serve themselves, because you can't learn the techniques to serve just yourself. By knowing more, by having a better memory, you're already being a better community member, a better citizen of this planet. And it's very, very, well, I suppose there could be people who use these techniques for harm, but I'm sure that's very, very small. And so with great power always comes great responsibility, right? And yes, you can call me Uncle Ben if you like, but it's very, very important to understand that we will win in this battle against digital amnesia, against digital ignorance, by preserving this tradition and preserving the things that this tradition can do to connect you at a very, very deep level with knowledge. Knowledge that you cultivate and put in your brain and own and deeply, deeply intertwine and make connections with other knowledge and create new knowledge from those connections that creates dialogue with other humans, that then creates new knowledge that is connected between you. Ezra Pound called this the luminous detail, when one thing and another thing come together and a third emerges. So the more that we are doing this, coming together, either as individual groups together or individual people together to converge and sometimes diverge, these luminous details arise, things that never existed before, things that never could exist before. But when you have memory techniques, you up the ante, you up the levels of knowledge that you have. It's a numbers game. The more you know, the more you can know, and the more you can know when you meet other people who know things and then create new things that never existed before because of the levels of knowledge that are higher than they were before and could never get that high without some kind of memory advantage. So memory techniques have survived for as long as they have because they helped humans survive. We know this. We know that the indigenous cultures memorized the plants that they would need to have during a drought. It was the memory techniques that helped them survive drought. And the techniques survived because of that survival advantage. And it's no different this day. We might not need to know the same kinds of information, but there are kinds of information out there that will give you survival advantage that you will not have otherwise. And so you need to figure out for yourself what those kinds of information are. And the more you give yourself the advantage to not just memorize them, but to know them so deeply that you're able to have them connect into knowledge and then connect with others to have these luminous details emerge from knowledge. That's just a fancy word. It's not, maybe it's a dangerous one because it sounds so ethereal and loosey-goosey, but let's just call it new knowledge that didn't exist before. The more that you are capable of doing that and actively doing it, the better. Everything goes up, and it all happens with memory. Because who do you want to be? You want to be the one who says, oh, I'll just look that up, you know? Or do you want to be the one who just can talk eye to eye and create new knowledge from your mind without having the concentration shattering breakage of looking things up all the time? Or do you just want to know? I think that we all just want to know. And you know, there may be a time when we take a pill every morning that allows us to access the internet mentally, and I shudder to think that that might be better than the world we have now, but I can't imagine that it would be better. I can't imagine anything being better than using the present moment as it is, regardless of the future to come, at the highest possible level, and to seek after knowledge, be a quest a person of questing after knowledge and having the most knowledge that you possibly can in a way that improves your lives and improves the lives of the others around you and makes more knowledge in the world possible through the power of connection. So if you're interested in the memory connection, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/connect. And I would, well, okay, we got one last question here. April's home. We're going to have some lunch here pretty quick. But DJ says, could you briefly clarify exactly what you're calling digital amnesia? Is it the thing that makes it so we don't remember telephone numbers anymore? That's a good question. But digital amnesia, very briefly, is the phenomenon of, it's more than a memory thing. It's the problem that people are not learning and understanding as well from digital information as from other forms of media, such as printed books. And to be fair, the research is relatively new, is not detailed enough, but you probably notice it in your own life. Due to the nature of so much digital information, if we just think about words on screens, you may find this in your own experience, that you're reading very differently. We've been trained by the online technology to skim rather than actually read, and that has to do with the scroll and other sort of features. Even, well, Kindle is maybe a little bit differently because you can swipe this way to change your pages or whatever, but even there, some of the research is really interesting, and I encourage you to go and educate yourself about it and then just figure it out for your own experience, because there certainly are kinds of books and types of books that I don't mind reading on Kindle, but I found overall, like I did at least a good solid 5 years of reading almost only on Kindle, and I just kind of started getting fed up about a real discrepancy of how much information I was actually remembering from them, and even the access to the information and the management of the information that we talked about at the beginning of this call, the internalization and externalization process. It's very, very different, and it's actually not nearly as convenient as it seems. And not only that, but it just doesn't have the same outcomes as it seems, and the likelihood of actually getting those outcomes from the traditional means. So it's really, digital amnesia starts with how the consumption of information has changed in the digital environment and has created a skimming behavior and a speed reading behavior that isn't really reading. It's something different than reading. And so it's not, we've talked about the power of attention, we're just not paying attention to the information in the same way. So we're not interacting with it in the same way, we're not consuming it in the same way, we're not absorbing it in the same way, and so we're not remembering it in the same way. And so this is sort of the origin of the term digital amnesia, which is not my own, by the way. So you can look that up. If you go to magneticmemorymethod.com/digital-amnesia, the source of that is there, linked to, and you can read it online, of course, but you can print it out. And I often, have things printed out from the internet, not just because it's more convenient to read them these days, but there's something about space, I think, that's involved here. And Stephen Koslin is a guy to look at for this. It's the case for mental imagery. And it's just, there's something about spatial memory here that is very, very important. So, and a lot of people have a hard time finding this book, so let me test my memory here. The Case for Mental Imagery, is that what it's called? Yes, The Case for Mental Imagery, Stephen Koslin. Good. So look it up, read this book, read it from cover to cover. Try, if you're not scientific minded, try your best to figure it out and understand it, because part of the argument here is that there's a relationship between space in the world and where in the brain the information stores memory. So, the brain stores information spatially, because we store information spatially. And so what ends up happening, and this is probably well known, but when information enters your eyes and then your brain starts through a really complicated set of chemical processes, distributing that information through the neural networks and encoding it where the neurons and the synapses meet, and all this stuff. It's actually breaking the information into individual pieces and storing it separately. And there's evidence that the dispersion process is related to space in the external world. So well, let's use an actual book here that has content rather than a journal. Well, that has content, but in any case, this information, there's a relationship between how it's spaced out in pages, right? This is halfway. The brain understands that, or that's halfway. The brain understands, no, that's halfway, whatever. The brain understands this spatially, and so there's an advantage in just remembering what you read by markers, spatial markers, like that was a quarter way through, that was halfway down the page, that was near the end. The brain understands that, and there's some kind of relationship to that between and how the brain spatially stores information, how it encodes it. So that can be part of the problem. Again, this research is very, very new, but this is part of the puzzle. It's part of unpacking this. And where in Kindle is halfway through a book? Where on a web page is 3/4 of a way down? That's a little bit more clear, but it still doesn't have that same in the worldness, doesn't have that same material reality. And that appears to be very, very important to the learning process, more than we thought. And we see this revenge of analog across the culture. And so it's not just about books. It's about music. It's about art and so forth. It's about tactile reality. So, you know, people ask me, well, what's the best app for practicing card memorization? This is the best app for memorizing card memorization. Part of memorizing cards has to do with where they're located in space, right? Especially if you're a magician. But nonetheless, there's a reason why that you will have, or there appears to be. I want to be very scientific about this. There appears to be, and ultimately it all comes down to you as an individual. So there may be people who do just fine. There may be generations who are doing better with the digital management. We'll see. But hopefully that answers your question, DJ. And I appreciate you asking it. It's a longer question that's answered more in full on the podcast and blog post, magneticmemorymethod.com/digital amnesia, rather digital-amnesia. And it's a conversation that's just beginning. Incidentally, it is the most shared post on the Magnetic Memory Method site. Help that become the even more most shared post by clicking those share buttons. If you happen to visit it and avail yourself of that information, I think that this is a good indicator of just how important this is, because it's a pain that people are having. They are being overwhelmed by information, just the flow of it that the digital media has enabled. But more than that, the actual medium itself appears to be lacking in a spatial ingredient that may be solved in the future. I don't know. But if you're struggling and you're learning only from online, then that may be for you a key part of the puzzle. We talk about this in the Memory Connection, so please get information about getting this at magneticmemorymethod.com/connect, and that is a project to help people who are really struggling with this problem of digital amnesia, which not only has to do with remembering stuff, but it also has to do with consistency, consistent application, and helping people be consistent. Because when we have consistency, we have greater connectivity, we have greater creativity, we have greater confidence, and that's ultimately what we always want. We want confidence, and we want confidence to be consistent. We want it to not have to somehow warm the engine every time, or stoke the fire every time. We just want it there. How do we get that? Well, we get it through aptitude, and we get aptitude by showing up. So DJ says, I'll definitely check it out, and we'll share it. Thank you. I got your book, and I guess I haven't gotten to that part yet. Well, the Memory Connection is designed to be read in conjunction with the newsletter and with the Seal of Approval Book Club. So I know that you're there, and so we will be covering that, and I really appreciate that you're a part of it, because you are a great scientist of these techniques in your own life, and I've really appreciated your participation in our Dream Recall Intensive, which is just another way of practicing, working with, accessing your memory on a daily basis to create consistency and the confidence that it brings. And not only that, but dreams, through associating to your dreams, can create many, many memory palaces, many, many bridging figures, and you never need to run out of the memory tools and assets that guide your practice, that create the consistency, showing up, and the excitement for doing it all the time. And then when you're in a situation, when you hear a number, for example, well, you don't have to have any kind of problem with that because you have the images right there. You have the practice. It's just part of your life, ongoing, and away you go. Names, for example, are another one. There's no reason to ever not remember a person's name, and little phrases, little things that come up that you want to remember, names of stores, names of products, names of whatever it is. You can have a mind that is raptly attuned to these materials and seizes upon them and really has an edifying experience that is impossible otherwise without it. Is it for everyone? Well, maybe not. Maybe not everybody wants to constantly be edified and enjoying this miracle of memory. And fair enough, because I like to pursue what's called persistent non-symbolic experience, which is something that happens with regular meditation practice, particularly if you practice for the experience of persistent non-symbolic experience. So that's another topic for another day, and it's great relief from constantly, being a thinking person. And the more that you can escape from the tyranny of constant thought, well, when you come back to thought, the thought is that much more powerful. So everything combines. There's a wonderful thing that you can create. Thing is you got to create it for yourself. So thank you all for being here today. It was an exciting live, and I really appreciate all the interaction. Hit that thumbs up. If you're watching this replay and you're not subscribed to this channel, hit subscribe and just go out there, do something awesome with your memory today. Be creative with your mind and enjoy this miracle that you have, because you have it in the now and you only have it in the now. And if you'd like more information about something that can help you make this happen for yourself, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/connect and let me send you the memory connection. That would be a great privilege and an honor, and I think that you will find it a very, very worthy thing indeed. And one last thing, the new podcast episode is out. It is really a question for you, which is how vital are vitamins for memory improvement? And please do listen. There's a special surprise in that podcast for you about halfway through. And I think you'll enjoy the episode in general, because it's just not that straightforward how vital vitamins are for memory improvement, and we're going to crack the code. Next week on the podcast, crossword puzzles. The week after, we're going to be talking about cryptocurrency, the challenges to our memory and to our learning ability that topic has, and some solutions about how to do it. And we'll be going on there'll be stuff coming out on the YouTube channel as well, and let me know what you'd like to see. And maybe it's possible. I've got ideas for 2018 that I'm gearing up for, and I really look forward to doing that. And you can help guide this project by being involved and speaking up and helping improve it with your feedback and commentary, so that you get more of what it is that's actually going to help you. This entire book is based on massive amounts of survey data and what people were saying they needed help with the most. And so I looked at all the things that the people who are getting success are doing, and I figured a way of describing it based on an accumulation of years and years of teaching these techniques to people, helping them get success, and why they're experiencing what I came to call the memory connection. And so the thing is that it's about memory improvement that lasts. It's not just like, I did some memory training once upon a time and then I sort of gave up on it. It's about memory improvement that lasts, that enters your life and stays with you and grows over time. So I don't create memory trainings that are just based on, this is the ancient technique. We're improving it constantly and making sure that it's based on what actually works for people, why it works, and what gets the results in a way that lasts. And there are reasons why that some people aren't getting results from it, and my devotion is in figuring out how to get the most possible people on board with this, because there are options for you no matter what if you want to use these techniques, and we're learning more and more about what those different options are. But they all start with understanding you as you, where you are, and figuring out how you're going to use these tools in your life, and not looking for a one size fits all kind of approach, not looking for magic bullets, because magic bullets do sort of exist, but they exist relative to your willingness to come and put the molten metal into the mold and watch it dry and then tap it and see, is this a good bullet or not? Then put it in the gun and fire. Or you can think of it as Zen archery. You know, there's an actual process to using memory techniques, and it can be very, very smooth, and it can get smooth very, very quickly, but you've got to be the one who puts your own arrows in your own quiver. That would be the information you need to memorize. And then you've got to have your memory palace. That target that you're going to shoot the arrow at would be your memory palace. And then you've got to go through the movement. And you can study until you're blue in the face, but unless you get yourself into the process, unless you're actually learning by doing, then that movement you want of just whew, bang, memorized, it's not going to happen. So really the job is, how can we get you in there? That's what I devote myself to. The memory connection is the way to do it. And that's at magneticmemorymethod.com/connect. And Harvinder says, when will the next book be released? I'm excited. I'm working on the next book now, and it is going to be released in early 2018, the first quarter. And also the translation that I'm working on of the Shigwa Jifa will be done in about halfway through 2018. The Shigwa Jifa is Matteo Ricci's Western memory technique, is basically what that would translate to. I'm very excited about that because he has some great ideas that really haven't been seen before, because as far as I know, there's no existence of his memory training in English. Anyway, it's time for lunch. Thanksgiving lunch. Woohoo! So thanks everyone for being here, and listen, come and visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com. Get involved. Thank you so much for your interest and participation. Thanks for all the thumbs up. Hit that thumbs up. Leave a comment below if you haven't already, or if you're watching the replay. And until we speak again, keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye.